The world is filled with mysteries, crimes, and horrors, and the crimes struck by Chinatown gangs are unsettling to say the least. This real story's focal point is unfathomable crime, innocent victims' death, and horrible tragedies. In this video, we will be discussing the truth behind the San Francisco Chinatown gangs. From criminals named Tongs to the gangs involved in the infamous Golden Dragon Massacre to the thought-to-be active Jackson Street Boys. Caution, this video is not for the faint-hearted. Let's dive into it, shall we? The first evidence indicates that the initial preparators of violence in Chinatown were gangs known as Tongs. However, their history is not as grim as their deeds. Originally, Tongs were benevolent protection societies, a Chinese political religious group that took on an American shape in the 19th century. The necessity for Chinese immigrants to be protected from unruly members of their own society, as well as from prejudice and criminal activity on the part of the white community, led to the trend for such societies to develop in the United States. But unfortunately, new, smaller, more specialized societies of merchants, artisans, and tradespeople eventually formed up, and a society of organized criminals as well raised its horrific head, who specialized in illegal stuff ranging from opium and gambling, which were both permitted in China, but not in the US, to prostitution and the sale of protection to Chinese merchants. These were their sources of income. As their number grew, territorial and operational disagreements arose, which led to deadly battles between the criminal triads and sowed the seeds for future terrors. These battles, referred to as Tong Wars, were a series of bloody conflicts between rival Chinese Tong factions that started in the late 19th century and were centered in Chinatowns across different American cities, especially San Francisco. The causes of Tong Wars were as small as inter-gang disputes, such as the public defamation of another Tong's honor, the failure to pay the full price for a slave girl, or as big as the murder of a member of a different Tong. The control of opium, prostitution, gambling, and territory were fought for in Chinatown's alleyways and streets by paid soldiers known as Bu Hao Doi. These Tong Wars in San Francisco's Chinatown neighborhood lasted until 1921. At its height, the numerous criminal Tongs were thought to number between 19 and 30. However, the exact number is disputed due to repeated splintering and mergers between the Tongs. The force knew they had to do something, and for this purpose, a loose alliance made up of the Chinatown police, Donaldina Cameron, the courts, and the Chinese community itself was set up that attempted to halt the tide of the fighting Tongs. Moreover, as some people like to call it divine intervention, an earthquake hit San Francisco in 1906, and the damages plus subsequent fires caused by the earthquake were the death knell for the Tongs because they destroyed the brothels, gambling dens, and opium houses that the criminals had used for the majority of their income. Most Tongs found it difficult to recover, so they left the historic Chinatown. After 1906, there were a few Tong Wars, but Inspector Jack Mannion, the head of the Chinatown team, persuaded the final 6 Tongs to establish a peace committee in 1913. After that, the San Francisco Chinatown became calmer, with the last Tong-related murder occurring in 1921 and the final slave girl raid taking place in 1925. But as they say, calm is forever temporary. As Ching, which translates to Chinese youth, a Chinese-American street gang was established in San Francisco, California in 1964. Drug sales, racketeering, and gambling were just a few of the crimes in which the Ching had been complicit. Their history involves the immigrants who came from Hong Kong and China and got employed at the Hop Sing Tong casinos in San Francisco's Chinatown. They founded the Ching. The gang was initially created as a means of defense against the American-born Chinese, but it eventually turned into a criminal organization. Beginning in 1969, a conflict erupted between the Ching and the Sui Sing Tong over control of the extortion, loan sharking, and gambling ring in Chinatown. Following numerous killings and murders, the Sui Sing gave up their home region and relocated to Oakland. Ching originally gained extensive media attention as a result of the 1977 Golden Dragon Massacre, GDM, which will be discussed later in the video, involving another Chinese gang called Joe Boys, JBS. The Joe Boys, often referred to as the JBS or Ching Yi, was established in San Francisco's Chinatown in the 1960s. The Joe Boys were first referred to as the Joe Fong Boys after its founder Joe Fong, a former Ching member. Most of their members were either Hong Kong natives or descended from Hong Kongers. Joe Fong was detained on October 2, 1972, and he started serving a life sentence for an attempted murder on February 4, 1973. By the time he was captured, the conflict between the Ching Yi and the Ching had escalated into a horrible war that had claimed 13 lives starting in 1969. The Ching Yi subsequently changed into the Joe Boys. Just after 50 years of non-prominent illegal and violent activities, a deadly conflict broke out in the streets of Chinatown in 1997 in San Francisco. In one of the most peaceful cities in the US, two warring gangs caused fear, worry, and even death as the Joe Boys took their revenge. During this period, illicit fireworks sales in Chinatown became a significant source of income for gangs. Every year, as the 4th of July drew near, young people from all over the Bay Area would pour into the neighborhood to buy firecrackers and other illegal fireworks. The Ching authorized the Ping Boys from the Ping UN projects on Pacific Avenue to manage the business in 1977 in exchange for 10% of the profits. On July 4th, a group of Joe Boys headed for the Ping Yun projects with the intention of robbing the Ping Boys of the sales earnings, thinking they would obtain their portion of the amassed wealth. Although Joe Fong was no longer on the streets to manage the gang's operations at this point and had been in prison for a number of years, his supporters were still wreaking havoc with the name of Joe Boys. The Joe Boys were unable to park nearby, and as they made their way to the projects on foot, their foes became aware of them. Felix Louis, a Joe Boy, was murdered, and 4 other Joe Boys were injured in the ensuing gun war on Pacific Avenue. The Ching leader, Michael Hot Dog Louis, was blamed by the Joe Boys for their failure. They retreated to prepare for revenge, and revenge they took. The incident took place on Sunday, September 4th, 1977, after receiving information that Michael Louis was inside the Golden Dragon restaurant on Washington Street. Louis spotted the approaching trio of armed masked men and fell to the ground. Shotguns and semi-automatic weapons were used by the gunmen to pelt the restaurant with fire, leading to the deaths of 5 civilians and the injuries of an additional 11. Significantly, the Hop Sing Tong, whose youth faction, the Hop Sing Boys, occasionally sided with the Ching, owned the Golden Dragon restaurant. This incident came to be known as the Golden Dragon Massacre. Last, but oh boy, not certainly the least, let's take a look at the Jackson Boys, aka Jackson Street Boys. They are an Asian-American street gang and criminal organization. The gang, which has Cantonese and Vietnamese members, operates from its headquarters in San Francisco's Chinatown. It was founded by 3 brothers who had previously been Ching members and defected to the Wo Hop 2 when the Wo Hop 2 drove the Ching out of San Francisco. The Wo Hop 2 triad, which controlled San Francisco's Chinatown in the 1980s and early 1990s, was later replaced by the Jackson Boys gang. The gang has been convicted of crimes such as extortion, racketeering, drug trafficking, drug dealing, arson, assault, murder, robbery, house invasions, auto theft, and burglary. But one of the more infamous crimes the gang committed took place on June 30th, 1995. On crowded Stockton Street in Chinatown during the day, a portion of the Jackson Street Boys opened fire on another. There were 7 innocents who were hit, including a pregnant lady. Moreover, back when pyrotechnics were openly sold on the streets of Chinatown, Jackson Boys were also the main traffickers of illicit fireworks. And with that, we conclude another tale of mysteries, crimes, and horrors. If you had goosebumps, be sure to give this video a like, comment, and subscribe down below. Share the video to all interested in crime, and tap on the bell icon so you get to see our every thriller-filled video. I shall haunt you in the next video. Boo out!